Okay, we'll give everybody just 1 minute to get connected.
Okay.
Okay, we can get started.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Alpine's monthly webinar series. At Alpine, our passion is to optimize supply chains, empower operations, and deliver lasting value through innovation, expertise, and client-centric solutions. So today's webinar, we are going to be talking about mastering labor management, elevating engagement within your DC. The information discussed in this webinar represents the views of the individuals and does not constitute legal advice. You should consult with your organization's leadership and legal counsel. My name is Jim Chamberlain. I am Senior Managing Director at Alpine Supply Chain Solutions. I will be your co-presenter during today's session, and my partner in crime is John Seidl from TZA. John, if you wanted to give a quick background.
Sure, thank you, Jim. So I work with TZA, who's a labor management software vendor, helping them with some of their partnerships and alliances, and which is very much inclusive of Alpine, with which we have a strategic partner relationship. Been working in the supply chain space since the 80s.
And myself, I have been doing labor management one way or the other since 1990, right out of college. My first project was rolling out a labor management system and engineered labor standards to Teamsters Union facility in North Bergen, New Jersey. I'm still here. The only thing I think I lost from that exercise was my hair, but everything else is good. And I'm a huge proponent of labor management. And today, what we're really going to focus on is what we like to call the secret sauce of labor management. When you're typically rolling these out, there's a big focus on the engineering, the math, but we're going to focus on all those other things that really help to change your culture and drive ultimately your operation from a functioning one to a high performing operation. And if you have any questions during our presentation, please, shoot those across. Do not wait to the end, and we will answer them as we go. And you can use that chat icon at the bottom of the screen. So our agenda today, we're going to be talking about 10 different items: clear communication, goal setting and recognition, training and skill development, flexible scheduling, performance feedback. We'll talk a little bit about gamification and how that can really have an impact on the different generations that are working within your operations. We'll talk about employee involvement, employee assistance programs, benchmarking and analytics, and then finally, we'll round it out with cross-training opportunities. So clear communication. This, as we all know, is very important in any project you do. When it comes to a labor management program, even more so, because we are really changing how the work is evaluated, how the employees are looked at in terms of success. So communicating the difference between a cases per hour, pallets per hour, lines per hour operation, moving towards a percent performance or a engineered labor standard that focuses more on time and complexities of the work, the expectations change. So getting out in front of your team first and foremost with the kickoff messaging. And we always do kickoff meetings with the management team as well as the employees on the floor, so they understand, why are we doing this? What are we doing this? And how is this going to change my role within the facility. So those early communications to make sure there aren't any voids in communication, because when there are voids, that's when the innuendos or the rumors can start. So keep that communication going all the way through your labor management journey. And then also, we kind of touched on it when I mentioned gamification and the different demographics. Today's work world, we've got baby boomers, Gen X, Y, Z. I'm not even sure of what they all are, but those are different demographics, different people, different needs, different things that motivate them. So it's very important to understand as you're putting together your program, what are the things that are going to resonate with those different groups of people that are working within your facility. And then also message content. Be very careful with the messaging. Certain words have more emotion or charge to them. So be very aware of your people that are working in your facility and how one word could actually make a big difference. So think through those things when you're making your communications. I mentioned it earlier, frequency and timing. You cannot over communicate when you're talking about a project that is heavily laced with change. And then finally, two-way communication. You're going to be doing a lot of educating, but it's also important to make sure that the employees' voices are heard and that they know that they are encouraged to communicate what's working, what isn't, what are their ideas for how they can improve as you go along your journey. John, any other items you'd like to add to this?
No, I think you touched on it, and everyone's going to kind of spot a set of recurring themes as we go through the content. Employee engagement, effective communications is kind of at the heart of an effective labor management program. Having people feel ownership, having people feel valued, having people understand what's expected of them, and then be able to achieve those outcomes, a critical part, quite honestly, not only of just a labor management program, but of an effective workforce.
Great, thank you. So next, goal setting and recognition. So setting those clear and achievable goals, it's really critical to the success of the program. And just like anything, you can't improve what you don't measure, but it's also very important to make sure that when you're setting your goals, that those goals align with your overall organizational goals. And people like to know that what they're doing is supporting the overall organization. So when you're communicating and setting those goals, make sure that the goals that you're talking about in the highest C-level offices are also being communicated at the levels throughout the organization, so they understand, oh, what I am doing is helping to make our company grow, to help to improve job security. All those things really are important as you're going through this process. Make sure your goals are specific and measurable. So you do not want to focus solely on productivity. You want to make sure that the goals and what you're measuring support your mission, your vision, and your values as a company. So you may want to be a low-cost operation, but you also want to make sure that you're safe, you're accurate, you're consistent as you go through your day-to-day activities. Break down your goals into achievable milestones. So when you're evaluating performance within the facility, it's important to understand, how did I do yesterday? How am I doing week to date? How is it looking from the previous week? So that the employees always know how they stand and what they need to do to achieve those goals. And the goals should be relevant to the role and responsibilities of the associate. So one of the things that's very important on the inbound side is to make sure that you're receiving it, it's the right quantity, it's the right quality, it's damage-free. So your goals need to be focused on each job function a little bit differently. They must contribute to achieving the operational targets. So make sure your employees know, hey, if cost per case is an important metric, how does what we're doing support that? A safe operation means fewer claims. That means less operating cost. So that's why safety is important, as well as the fact that they are the most important asset within the four walls. And we want to make sure that they show up and leave with 10 fingers, 10 toes. Time-bound goals to create a sense of accountability and urgency. Typically, when you're doing goals and recognition, you do it on a weekly basis or maybe a 2-week basis, because that tends to flatten out the variability, but it also is at the right frequency where employees don't lose sight of those goals. Collaborate on the goal setting process. Tap into your people. Make sure that you're hearing what's important to them as you start to set those goals and as you start to develop the recognition programs around those. In the past, all recognition was targeted basically with dollars and cents. Nowadays, people are looking at, gift cards. Could it be a trip? Could it be time off? So tap into your workforce to understand what's important to them. Regular observations and feedback is also critical. And this is important because as you are setting goals, setting targets, setting up accountability, you want to show your people how to be successful. And that's part of what we do in the observations. Recognize and reward achievement. Don't just focus on the people that are struggling. You want to recognize those folks that are doing a great job for you. And then finally, review and adjust your goals as needed. So as you improve processes, your goals should change also. There's really no finish line. It's about what is the target for the here and now. John?
Yeah, no, Jim, I think you did a good job covering the landscape here. David, I saw your question in the chat. We'll address that on the next slide when I talk about training and skill development, about some of those trigger words. But a couple of really key things here, and you're going to hear it kind of over and over again when we talk about employee involvement and cross-training and stuff. Making sure that the goals are achievable and then recognized when they're achieved, as well as recognizing when someone's struggling to achieve their goals and what can you do in terms of skill development, more effective expectations, or better communications to allow that individual to be successful. So it needs to be a collaborative effort, both in terms of defining the goals and then measuring the performance against those goals, and recognition, especially for jobs well done, needs to be very public. So I'm going to take training and skill development. And David, I said I'd come back to your question because really the words and communication styles that are going to be ineffective depend a lot on who the people are that are communicating with each other. And it's different if it's one-on-one, it's different if it's a supervisor to a team or a group, or a facility leader to an entire organization. One of the training and skill development exercises that we typically see a need for is effective communications, and particularly around coaching, the observation and coaching process to make someone more effective in their job. Making sure that people feel comfortable in that observation process, that they have the opportunity to provide training, et cetera, is very critical. But in any case, how do you start if you're wanting to put a training program in place? Well, the first thing you got to do is understand what are the needs, right? What training and skills do our associates need to gain in order to be totally effective in their jobs and in the operation? So you need to assess at the individual level, at the team level, at the facility level, what capabilities exist, where are there gaps between those capabilities and those that are required in order to hit our operational goals, and then document those gaps and then define the training program that's going to close those gaps, help those folks be successful and continue to grow in their skills. So that's really the tailored training programs point there. Understand where you're starting and where you want to go, and then how you're going to get there. Training, for the most part, is effective when it's hands-on. There is a place for classroom training especially if you're talking about awareness development, an introductory of a new strategy or a new software application or something to get people comfortable with the look and feel or the strategy behind the why something is changing. But when it comes to training them how to do their jobs and how to develop new skills in terms of doing their jobs, hands-on, on the floor, learn by doing with guidance. If you need to, based on whatever the job is, you may be able to leverage a simulation strategy, but more often than not, it's probably, an effective learning curve in the labor management program and then effective supervisory training of those associates. So the technology training, not just for the WMS like it used to be. These days, it's a lot about the advanced automation and robotics and understanding how to interact with that automation, helping people feel comfortable with how they're being measured through the labor management system, the incorporation of how the various applications within the facility interact to support them doing their job. So not everyone needs to be a technical expert, but they need to be comfortable with the technology that they're interacting with. Cross-training, and we've got a whole nother slide on cross-training that we'll come up to, but obviously that can reduce overtime. It can increase utilization of your workforce. It can deal with operational bottlenecks, et cetera. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. A culture of continuous improvement is a core part of a performance-based culture. So learning needs to be continuous. People need to be challenged to grow. They're going to be more likely to be retained and be enthusiastic, have higher morale about their work if they feel like they're learning and growing and not just doing the same thing over and over again. And then finally, like Jim said under communication, training needs to involve a dialogue. Was this training effective? What could we do to make this training better? Who else should we be considering for training in this whatever aspect was that we were delivering? And it needs, of course, to incorporate all levels of the organization. Not only is it just SOP training, but there's an opportunity for communication training, leadership training, et cetera. And all of those require feedback in order to become more effective and kind of baked into the DNA of the organization. Jim, what would you add?
The one thing that I would add is when you're doing the training, it's important to do the classroom and then on the floor. My one piece of advice is keep the classroom training short, because people sitting in a classroom tend to lose interest, after a short period of time. So hit the bullets, the high points in the class, and then hit the floor. People learn best when they're doing.
Yeah, great point. Let's go. Yeah. So the next section is flexible scheduling. This is a relatively new aspect in the operational landscape. There are now tools out there that support more of a flexible work environment where people can opt in to work for certain shifts, a certain number of hours per week, in addition to kind of the traditional full-time shift-based operation. And why does this matter? Well, it's a lot about creating a work environment and being the employer of choice and your people valuing their ability to contribute while maintaining work-life balance, right? Everybody's dealing with a lot of things that can be personal issues related to family support, other conditions that they might be dealing with, education that they're trying to achieve outside the organization. Who knows what's stressing them out, right? But creating an environment where they have some control over their day-to-day or week-to-week work schedule, that, seeking that work-life balance at the individual level, going to really help out from a retention standpoint, reducing the turnover, offering something that is unique to your employee or associate base that your competitive employers in the vicinity might not be able to offer. Jim, and I'm going to steal this quote before he gets the chance to use it, but happy workers are more productive, right? So a better morale, better engagement, the employees feeling understood, all of these things are going to lead to greater productivity. It also gives you the flexibility if you have a seasonal business where you have peaks and troughs, whether those are month to month, week to week, or even this day of the week versus that day of the week. It gives you the flexibility to match the workforce to the work that needs to be done, improve the utilization of the employees that are there, and decrease the amount of overtime required to get the work done. It's also easier to hire. People value, whether they choose to take advantage of it or not, they value the fact that that flexible working arrangement is out there, and knowing that it's there should they choose to take advantage of it at some point in the future. And of course, when you reduce the overtime and improve the utilization, driving more productivity, guess what? You save money. So, Jim, what would you add?
Yeah, I think the key here is you want to differentiate your organization, your work environment from the competition. In today's landscape, people will easily jump across the street for a quarter an hour difference. What you want to be able to do is make sure your intangibles make them feel they're part of something that is different. And these things that we're kind of talking about, especially flexible scheduling, is just one of the ways that you can say, you know what, I could go across the street for that, but there's a lot more things that are keeping me here that have to do with more than just money.
So there was a question asked about, are we shifting the effort here then from the associate to the manager? And you're right. If you're taking advantage of one of the flexible scheduling tools that are out there, and basically the way they work is there's a app that you run on your phone or on your mobile device that shows you the available work slots, tracks who you are, what jobs you're qualified to do, the pay rates, et cetera. And basically what the employer does is they put the work shifts out onto the app, and then the employees that are qualified can sign up to work those particular hours or shifts or tasks, assuming there's a match. So it does create the overhead work associated with defining those flexible work situations that you want to put forth on the app. So there's some overhead there, but we believe that the savings generated from the reduction in turnover, the reduction in overtime, and the improved productivity will more than offset the work effort associated with the managers to have to manage a flexible work arrangement.
All right, performance feedback. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but regular and timely feedback, very important, especially in a labor management environment. Let your people know, like I mentioned, how did I do yesterday? How am I doing week to date? How did I do last week? What are the things that I'm doing well? What are the things that I need to work on? And part of the beauty of a labor management environment is, just like the previous question, management's role is to make sure that every one of the employees within the facility are going to be successful. And part of how they do that is the daily observations on the floor, to work with people, to really give them the tricks of the trade that they might not be aware of that are going to make their job easier. And a lot of times people think of a labor management environment as work faster, go faster. It's really about working smarter as a team, removing the barriers. And that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. And when we say performance and feedback, it's really a two-way street where we're looking for the information from the employees on the floor for the things that are keeping them from being successful. And the management team is there really to work with them to remove those and to improve their skill sets. When you are doing your performance feedback, be specific and make sure that the employees know we're not talking about 10 different things. It's this one specific thing that I need you to focus on, and let them know the whys too. This is going to make you safer. This is going to make your teammates more productive. One of the team-based best practices that we have in facilities are parking your piece of equipment on the side of the aisle that you're picking from. And that's one that a new employee might not realize. If you're picking thousands of cases in a given day, those extra 3 or 4 steps that you take every time you get off your pallet jack or piece of equipment to go to and from the location, that adds up. And that means you had to do more to get the same amount of activity done if you would have parked your pallet jack closer to the side of the aisle you're picking from. And from a team perspective, parking on the side of the aisle you're picking from allows other workers to pass, and the team is productive too. So letting people know the whys really help. When you are giving feedback and being constructive with your criticism, you want to make sure that you use the sandwich approach. Let them know the things they're doing well before you focus on the things you want them to improve, and then end it with, hey, you're doing a great job in these certain things. I'm going to come back in a week's time and we're going to see how you're doing on, that one or two areas that I've identified that you need to work on. It's very important that the people also know this is about performance. This is about process. It's not about the person. So a lot of times that is not resident in a pre-labor management environment. So you do have to let people know that how we get better is to challenge each other. But once again, we're focusing on the performance, the process, not the person. Totally encourage two-way communication. We always say that the associates on the floor, one of your biggest responsibilities is to identify and bring up the things that are getting in your way that are keeping you from being successful. The other piece, when you're doing feedback, set clear expectations. Like I mentioned, make sure it's a smart discussion. So it's time bound. I'm going to come back in 1 week and we're going to evaluate your improvements in the areas that we discussed. And then also too, offer support, guidance as needed. You can demonstrate, you can model the performance that you're looking to have people perform, because a lot of times words are more abstract. And then finally, with all this, track progress. John, any thoughts?
No, I think that last one is super important, right? For the individual themselves, we've delivered them some feedback through the observation and coaching session. We've captured their feedback to the information that they were provided. You want to document that and retain it, not only for their own development, but for the benefit of the HR organization should the individual prove to be incapable of performing that work and you need to take some sort of corrective action. Having an audit trail of what messaging was delivered, what feedback was received, what direction was given, what progress has been made on whatever performance metrics that we're tracking will make the job of the leadership team and the HR organization easier.
All right, we mentioned this early, but gamification, labor management programs are becoming more sophisticated, and it's tailored towards the newer generations. The word work is one of those words that can be charged, and if you want it to be an environment, once again, where people are more engaged, gamification is one of those ways that you can do that. It helps to increase motivation. If someone sees that, hey, for the last 3 days, you've performed every assignment above goal, that's your streak. Here's the hours of the day that you focused on direct value-added activities versus other activities. There's so many different ways that you can turn it into more of a competition and one where people are more engaged and working in a more positive manner. It helps with improved skill development also, because once again, you can start to track the desired performance and give people feedback in basically near real-time manners with these newer systems and features. And it also helps with better team collaboration, because you can do the gamification so that it's not only focused on the individual, but you're also giving team results and how each of the different areas, the different job functions are performing. Helps with reduction in errors and accidents. A lot of the gamification, even outside of labor management, like with lift trucks, can track whether they came to a complete stop at intersections, whether when they're mounting and dismounting equipment, it was at a complete stop. A lot of those things that can be more safety related. And once again, another thing that can help you with retention and employee satisfaction, when that word work doesn't really come into it, but it's more of a, hey, this is what I do and it's actually fun, to do my job. John, any thoughts on this one?
So Tara, I saw your question about what are some of the negative aspects of gamification? What have we seen? And you need to be conscious of who your workforce is, the demographic or demographics that are represented in that workforce. Gamification seems to work really well with a younger workforce. We find as part of our TZA ProTrack solution, we will put up production dashboards where you can recognize top contributors at the individual level or the team level. You can recognize work anniversaries and birthdays and new babies and all that kind of stuff. And the public recognition of accomplishment, which is really the outcome of a competitive or gamified work environment, is generally perceived as a positive. But there are certainly groups of warehouse associates, whether you're thinking about age or other demographic attributes, where this is not going to be of interest to them and not appeal to their sense of work ethic. So you need to think about who the audience is and tailor your approach to gamification to align with the associates that are going to be part of the programs, so that you actually get the positive impact, the collaborative outcomes, the improved productivity, the reduction, et cetera, and not just a bunch of people rolling their eyes and going, oh my God, now what do we got to do, right? So think about who it is that's participating in.
And remember, you can always change. And part of understanding if you should change is talk to your people, get their feedback. Is this something that's interesting to you? Does this information resonate with you? Never forget that your people will be very honest with what's important to them.
Employee involvement. So we're back to me. Emma, I didn't want to lose sight of your question that you asked when I had flexible scheduling up about how does that work with resource planning. So I'm just going to step away from this slide for a few seconds and answer that question real quick. Resource planning, depending on the type of business being supported by the warehouse, can be anywhere from science to a dark art, right? I mean, e-commerce facilities where you don't have insight to what today's orders are going to be, let alone tomorrow's. Labor planning, labor scheduling is really hard, right? In a more traditional manufacturing environment or a wholesale facility or something where demand is known well in advance, it's a little easier to look at the work that needs to be done and do the math to determine what your labor plan is going to need to be. A lot of the flexible scheduling tools are actually almost real time. So you can post positions today for tomorrow and have an element of your workforce that's actually looking for almost an Uber-esque kind of working experience where they're going to check each day and see where they want to work and if they want to work based on what else they have going on in their life. So you deal with it by leveraging whatever visibility you have to predicted demand and then trying to staff to the best of your ability. Employee involvement, probably the more common phrase for this is employee engagement. It is a critical part of any labor management program in order for it to be effective. And we've dealt with this in several of the other slides, but building that motivation, creating that sense of commitment, ownership, even loyalty to the organization is all going to drive, productivity. Empowering their employees to feel like they're valued, they're listened to, their work is appreciated. All of that is going to lead to productivity and performance improvements. And an attitude that will carry over. They'll want to learn how to do new things. They'll want to get better at their jobs and figure out how to create more value when they already feel like they're being valued. And believe it or not, that positive work environment, that improved morale, we have fewer issues with people being ill, whether we're talking physically ill or mentally ill. Creating an environment where people are feeling good about going to work as opposed to having to go to work, you get better outcomes. So the more you engage those employees, both one-on-one and in a group or team setting, the better the outcome is going to be. It used to be, right? Years ago, when we sold labor management solutions, it was all about how do I drive productivity? How do I put in that engineered standard and squeeze a few more units per hour out of this facility or reduce my cost per unit shipped by a nickel or something? These days, we have as many conversations about employee engagement, coaching, retention. I mean, productivity is still there, still super important. It's what pays for the solution. But, don't underestimate how important having those employees feel engaged is, and how that's going to drive the performance of the operation overall and really improve the culture. That performance-based culture is really what's at the heart of a labor management program. And it starts from the senior most individual inside that facility all the way down to the brand new hire, as an hourly associate. Having people out on the floor valuing the work that's being done by others. I mean, some of the highest performing DCs I've ever been in, the facility manager knew every single person who worked there by name, right? And could walk the facility and ask them how they were doing and how their family was. And that sense of belonging to a group drives an amazing set of outcomes. Jim, what would you add?
Yeah, one of the areas with employee involvement, I've done roundtables in the past, and it's a good way to show how much you care about your employees. And in one of them, I had a gentleman who said, Jim, I feel like I'm doing all the best practices when I'm being observed. I'm, hitting the targets or exceeding the targets. I don't understand why I'm below goal. And I said, well, what's your name? Let me look. And I looked at that user daily detail report that shows every assignment for an employee. And I looked at it and I said, I got it. I said, look here, your first assignment, your assignment around your break, your lunch, and the end of shift, they're all low performing assignments. They're the only ones. So what I did was engaged in a conversation and said, at the beginning of the shift, it looks like, you're getting off to a slow start. Maybe you're not, getting out and getting your equipment and going. Maybe a break or lunch, you're taking 5 or 10 minutes extra. And at the end of the shift, maybe you're shutting it down. So that kind of an engagement and discussion with an employee can really help them to understand that we really do care. And if we care about the employees and we show that, that's just going to build that much more loyalty from your team. So it's just a good example too of within a labor management program, there's so much information that you can use to help, specific instances that employees may be struggling with. John kind of was touching on this, but employee assistance programs are now part of every company. But the key is they're underutilized is what we find, because of the fact that there's still a lot of hesitancy for people to necessarily use these different services that are available. And part of what we really strive for is that there's a comfort and a openness to using, these offerings. And what we like to see our management team do is model that, these services are no different than if you had a broken bone or some sort of accident. And when you look at all these once again help to foster that environment of a team, that environment that will help to foster more engagement. And you can see that at one time or another, all of us have probably gone through one of these 10 items. And I think it's very key just to make sure you're communicating with your teams to take advantage of these things so that you can be the best when you're doing your job. John, any comments on this one?
No, I think you're spot on. It's probably a great idea to make sure that you're appropriately publicizing these programs and not just giving somebody a piece of paper the day they start and then they never hear about it again. Make sure that as part of the broader communication strategy, you're providing updates on access to these benefits and encouraging people to seek help wherever they might need it. I mean, it is, this is the flip side of the last topic, right? Employee engagement is helping them do their jobs better. These programs are helping them have a better life and making sure that they understand they're there. So no matter what challenges they face today or tomorrow, they can take advantage of the programs and will appreciate the value of that benefit and remain good employees for the organization.
Yeah, great point. All right, benchmarking and analytics. So once again, score of the game, make sure that your key performance indicators are communicated and visible at all times. So whether that's perfect orders, how many days safe without accidents, cost per case, productivity or performance, make sure those are tracked and visible every day. The great part too about an LMS, you have near real-time information at your fingertips, which allows you to do more benchmarking and measuring, allows you to segment data for analysis. You know, you can look at the entire operation, you can look at it by supervisor, by job function, direct time, indirect time. There's so much information that allows you to dissect problems and opportunities within your operation. And then also predictive analytics. That's what's great about a labor system is you start to understand, okay, I know what my productivities are, not only just across each one of my job functions, but maybe even to the day of the week, so that you know that my productivities dip a little on Wednesdays because the order complexity is typically higher. That allows you then to understand even at a more micro level how you need to come into your operation staffing each one of the functions to make sure that you're balanced and ready to go. And then it also sets you up for less moves throughout the day. John mentioned visualizing the data with dashboards. The more you can make this information accessible, not only on the floor, but in your break rooms, so that people, once again, don't have to go far to understand how they're doing and how the operation is doing. And then finally, John mentioned this one too, but establish continuous improvement processes. How you do it today should not be how you're doing it a year from now. You should always be working with your team to say, how can we improve, whether it's focusing on the people, process, or systems that are a part of your operation. John, anything to add on this one?
Yeah, you know, this is really analytics in particular is where we're seeing the evolution of the LMS space, right? We're getting better and better and more detailed analytics available to the end user. And it can be the chief supply chain officer comparing facility 1 to facility 2. It can be the facility manager comparing teams to each other. It can be the supervisor looking at the individual associates that they're managing. And it can be looking at the, as Jim used in his example, looking at the individual tasks performed by a particular associate. You have access to all of this data in real time throughout the day. And it's going to allow you not only as a supervisor or manager to take action on it, but it's going to also allow you, as the analytical capabilities continue to improve and we start to see more and more predictive analytics and ultimately the incorporation of AI technology into these solutions, it's going to allow you to recognize these problems before they become apparent at the operational level. This team looks like, you know, we're halfway into the shift. It looks like we're consistently off plan. Hey, what can we do from a, you know, resource perspective to help them catch up before we get to the end of the day and recognize we didn't get all the orders out the door. So look for better and better analytics. And as AI works its way into the LMS space, this is where you're going to see it. But Jim?
Yep, great point. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to you, John.
Okay. So I know we're running through a fair amount of our time. We're at 44 past the hour. So we've just got a couple of slides left here. In fact, this slide, and then we'll be to any questions that we have outstanding. So I think we're okay there. Cross-training, we touched on this before, but this is really important, not only from a skill development standpoint, but, you know, people get sick, people take vacations, people need to go on leave. That, you know, you run into situations where You might not have the planned labor availability for a particular function. So this gives you the flexibility to leverage people from elsewhere in the operation to come help out wherever you might have a shortfall. It also drives a greater spirit of collaboration because more people know each other and have respect and appreciation for each other in the work that they do, fostering a better, more productive environment. And we already talked about the skill development aspect of it, but people like the variety in the workday, right? So that it contributes to retention. It reduces your reliance on just a few people who might have a certain set of skills. If you have backup resources available, it reduces the need for overtime. So you've got cost savings associated with it and higher utilization, right? You don't have anybody standing around waiting for work to be done elsewhere. You can take those people and help, if your pickers are slow and your replenishment operation is behind, you can recast people to help out. And probably not a great example, but there are a lot of those if you think through it. It also creates a better opportunity to evolve your processes over time. You'll have more people that have feedback on a process. You'll have more people that can see where change is required, and it will create a sense of adaptability because they're learning new skills. Of course, you can get people promoted into managerial or leadership roles as they gain greater communication skills and greater functional and technical skills. And then ultimately, right, you're going to improve the service to your customers. You're going to have a better outcome in terms of getting orders out the door and whatever KPIs are important. So, Jim, what would you add on that one?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on some really good points. Cross-training, in my mind, too, is very strategic because it helps you to avoid pinch points or vulnerabilities within your organization, which leads to all these 9 items that are going to make your organization stronger. And I know we're going to be moving into the questions here on the next slide, but really, there's been a theme as we've gone through all of these the different slides on this deck, and it really gets to focusing on the people. It's all about the people. And a wise person once told me back in the day that happy people do good work. And if you think about it, the things that we were covering are all geared towards making sure your people are happy. And if they're happy, they're going to be loyal, and they're going to help your organization grow.
So, Jim, we got a couple of questions in the chat. I'll run through one, probably toss it to you. But the first question we got from Raphael is, who do you propose do observations once you finish the labor management implementation? Raphael, we typically would propose the area supervisor be responsible for doing the observations. I think until they're fully trained on doing observations, they may need some support from more senior leadership to make sure that they're effective in both the observational process as well as the communication of outcomes around the observational process. A good labor management system allows you to tailor the observations to meet the specific requirements of the job and the individual that you're observing, and capture the feedback from that individual after the observation when you're providing them feedback and the feedback they're giving you. So it is a role for the supervisor, and the LM will suggest people that are worthy of observation, either based on performance challenges or particularly strong performance where they're consistently exceeding standards or expectancies that you want to go call out and recognize. And it will also trigger a minimum number of observations for each individual within whatever calendar period. If you want to make sure that you talk to everybody at least once a month, for example, the LM can trigger those observations. So it's not just the analytics of real-time performance. It can also be part of your employee engagement strategy based on constant communications. Jim, anything would you add to observations?
Yeah, I would add too that the building owner should make a point of going out on a, maybe once a week and do an observation with their supervisors and watching the interaction between the supervisor and the employees that are being observed, because the observation process is so critical, and it also can highlight whether the supervisor needs to have more training on coaching or the how to give constructive feedback. So it's very important that multiple levels are involved and they're seeing what's going on with the organization.
Cool. Raphael had a follow-up question on that around training for doing observations and what does it cover? And there's really a two-part answer for that. So as a software vendor, a company like TZA would include training in how to use our tool, right? How do you set up an observation? How do you define the questions you want to ask? How do you capture the feedback? How do you utilize the LMS in the observation process? But a company like Alpine would come in and as part of the broader training around a labor management program would help you understand what is your observational strategy? How often do I want to observe my people? What should be the triggers for observation? How do you communicate effectively in the observation process? What are the key questions, strategies around effective communication, et cetera, that you want to use? So there's the technical aspect of utilizing a tool for observations that would come from the LMS vendor. And then there's the consultative strategic approach to how to do the best observations that would come from the consultant like Alpine. And then there was one other question that we had in the chat, Jim, from David. And wow, David, I'm not sure I understand the context of your question because I don't remember what slide you asked it on. David, can you help us clarify your question?
And while that's, if there's a item being typed into the chat, one other thing on observations is it's important to do those observations because typically what you'll find is when people are being observed, they are at or exceeding goals, which in itself then establishes that the goals are fair and attainable because you are able to collect all these and understand that, hey, 95% of the time when we're observing people, they hit or exceed those goals, which helps to reinforce their validity.
Okay, so we got a new question in the chat. Tara, I'll answer that one. So pushback from leaders who are worried about productivity losses when associates are cross-trained. So we've seen clients go for job certification where you have to be certified to do certain tasks. So you need to have a minimum proficiency and actually pass some sort of a test and in order to be qualified to do that job. So in theory, they should be as qualified as someone who does it full time. Now, obviously, if I'm doing this job once a month and somebody else is doing it every day, they're going to be better at it than I am. So you're right. There is a productivity impact as they come back up to speed. We use learning curves in our standards to account for somebody who might not be as well versed in a particular job as someone who's been working in that job for an extended period of time. So we're not going to punish the associate from a performance standpoint, but what you need to do is create some sort of trade-off analysis for leadership that says, hey, the cost of not getting this work done is X, right? We don't meet our customer expectations in terms of getting the work done and the orders out the door. Whereas if we took these receiving associates and had them help us load shipping trucks, we're going to be able to get the orders out the door. And while they may not load as efficiently as the people who do it for a living, that's a lower cost than that would be associated with not getting the orders out the door at all. So, I mean, it's very much case by case, and it's understanding really the trade-offs and the implications of either doing it or not doing it in the particular environment. Certainly, you maybe don't want somebody who unloads trucks for a living to be cross-trained to run some advanced piece of automation because they might not have the wherewithal to get there, and it may actually introduce risk, or something. So it's very, very dependent. And then David asked a question related to one of the slides around communication and being cognizant of the words used. This is, David, this is the charged words are different depending on who you're talking to, right? If a 60-something might get more upset about different words or different communication styles than a 20-something, or someone of a certain background might be more offended by certain words, language, body language, et cetera, than someone else. So there isn't like a master list of don't use this word ever, right? I've never seen such a thing. I mean, obviously, from an HR training standpoint, there are things related to harassment that obviously every supervisor should know how to avoid. But beyond that, it's just more about tailoring your style to be effective with whoever it is you're talking to. Jim, anything to add? I'm done. I know we're 55, so.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I think the only thing left is to just give a preview of the May webinar, which will be navigating enterprise software implementations, deciphering vendor and client responsibilities. So the date for that is May 15th at 1 p.m. Central. And if you want to get a sneak peek of the webinar page, you can click on the link below.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for participating, and we'll look forward to talking to you out in the market.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.